can't hear him. Huh? 1, 2, 3. And for my next number. Okay. I'm gonna do a introduction. Okie dokie. Welcome this morning, and we're so glad you're here. We have a wonderful speaker, and our associate pastor. Okay, can you hear me now? Okay. We have a wonderful speaker this morning. Jane is from the Alzheimer's Association, and we also, okay, and so we have also some people from the Alzheimer's Association who are volunteers, and they are learning to give presentations like Jane is doing for us this morning. I can tell you from experience that I've been through Alzheimer's with 3 family members. I did an internship with the Alzheimer's Association, so I thought I knew something about it. And going to her presentation was amazing. It was practical, it was useful, and it was loving and kind. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to ask Sylvia, our associate pastor, to come up and open us with a word of prayer.
Well, thank you all for being here on this cold day, and we also thank people who will be watching this later. Thank you for Jane for coming. Let us pray together. Dear God, thank you for drawing us together as a community. We pray for hope for our loved ones, for understanding and wisdom. Guide our speaker, Jane Hunley, and we're thankful for her presence and her expertise. We pray, God, that you would grant us peace and joy in our midst and through our connections. We're grateful for this space and time. In the holy name of Christ, we pray. Amen.
A little bit about format. So Jane has a wonderful presentation with PowerPoint, and there will be a time for you to, if you wish, ask questions after she finishes her presentation, or if the Spirit moves you while she's speaking and you've got a question that is right what she's talking about, feel free. Jane Hunley.
So, I want to thank Pam because it is a really nice time when folks invite us to come out. Can you hear me? I'm Jane. As she said, I am a very informal speaker. So there are no rules here, other than what would be the sanctuary rules. My work for 40 years was with older adults. I'm a social worker. I trained in child abuse and ended up working with seniors for 40 years. Love it, and now I am one. So that's my tagline is, started when I was 22 and now I'm 68. I have volunteered for Alzheimer's for many years. It's probably my most interesting and compassionate topic that I work in. And so I'm pretty passionate about this and bringing information to people. So Chris is my new best friend in the balcony, and he is going to run the slides. Hopefully you can see them, but Pam will share them. So as a volunteer for Alzheimer's, I use their presentation. They're interested, and Chris, you can start kind of moving it forward. They're interested in sharing with groups general and then more specific information, because how many of us know someone who has been diagnosed with dementia? Okay, and I'm going to put up all the volume is significant. And so as Chris goes forward, we know we have, at minimum, 6 million individuals who are living with dementia. What I want to mention to you is a number a lot of people have not heard. So there are 200,000 individuals under 65 presently diagnosed. This is a really important thing for us to know because often we think about this as only an elder condition. And as we have learned more about this disease, and it is a disease over the years, we know that there are many different forms of dementia, and that those individuals who are diagnosed under 65, and particularly under 60, it's a bit of a different disease. We're not going to speak a lot about that condition today, but please be aware, I did have a friend diagnosed at 57. She started having issues at 53 in the workplace, and we just didn't recognize it. And so, as Pam said, having family members, my father did not evidence any cognitive impairment until he was 93. He died at 96. I just met a gentleman who also comes from rural Illinois, another farm person. I grew up on the farm. My father was fortunate. He was able to stay on the farm at age 95 until 3 weeks before he passed. So the point of sharing those examples is every situation is different. All we can do in a presentation is share some of the similarities. So I'm going to have you continue forward, Chris. The mission of Alzheimer's is to bring you accurate information. So again, not something, you have some great Facebook groups, but this is the current information. They focus on research, quality of care and support, so you hear about their support groups. But also, a lot of the focus now is on risk reduction and early detection. So I speak to classes at SMU a lot, and 22-year-olds are going, what can I do now? So we're learning more about what we can do at any age. Okay, Chris. So briefly, before we start on the communication piece, I love the dementia umbrella because it helps us get a visual picture. People often say to me, well, isn't Alzheimer's and dementia the same thing? Well, we use the terms interchangeably, but the umbrella helps us remember. So if you have an umbrella that's flowers, underneath it it's roses and tulips and gladiolas. This is the same. The dementia umbrella allows you to understand that over the years we have been able to begin to diagnose with specificity different kinds. So the little blip there, Alzheimer's is the largest because that typically we believe is represented in about 70% of dementias. Vascular is the next most diagnosed, Lewy body, frontal temporal, and then kind of others. It lists Huntington's here, but I think people in the community probably were more familiar with folks with Parkinson's disease. Not everyone with Parkinson's will develop dementia, but some people will. So if you look at this list, we've had a lot of prominent celebrities recently who have told us or disclosed their diagnosis. Can anybody think of someone who has disclosed an Alzheimer's diagnosis? Beg pardon? Okay, and specifically, Bruce Willis' family disclosed that he had frontal temporal. Well, does it matter? Well, I'm sorry, I thought it was, is that better? I thought it was reverberating. So the frontal temporal, specifically, I think Robin Williams, the family later said Lewy body. Rosalind Carter's family disclosed her Alzheimer's. They're coming forward in a way that allows us to understand that this is a very broad disease and that the categories are increasingly important as we try to assist people in preparing for the future. The bottom one you see is the mixed dementia, so that there are individuals who maybe they had a stroke and recovered quite well and have just a little bit of vascular dementia, but also will develop Alzheimer's. Okay. Chris, I'll have you move forward. So just to clarify so we're on the same page, Alzheimer's is a disease, period. Just diabetes is a disease. So it's just that it is a disease of the brain, and it impacts memory, thinking, behavior, and kind of that global cognitive process that we all use every day. Abstraction, reasoning, calculation, judgment. So when we think about dementia, often we only think about memory, because that's sometimes where we'll notice someone's having a problem. But it's a much broader, cognitive functioning is broader, much more global, and it has to be severe enough to interfere with daily living. So I have some memory loss, but I'm still day-to-day able to function safely and independently at this time. Specifically, now remember, every one of those types under the umbrella is different. Alzheimer's is progressive. So presently, we know that people progress typically slowly. We know if there's a huge change, it's usually not Alzheimer's, they're usually sick. But people have lived as long as 20 years with the disease. Others has manifested differently and have had a more rapid progression. So as we diagnose individuals earlier, we know typically in the early stage it's kind of mild. People might not notice who are not around someone all the time. That allows us an opportunity to really begin to respect that person and plan with them for the future. Okay, Chris. So I want to mention, because what do you think is the biggest risk factor for dementia? Age. So the three largest risk factors: age, family history, and genetics. Well, I'm not unhappy to be 68, but I am progressing on. I can't do anything about those, but it's good for me to know it, because by the time, if I'm fortunate to live to 85, that risk increases. It also increases by some of what we have been focusing more in terms of disparities. And I always share this slide because I think we want to be certain we're sharing this in the community. Blacks are twice as likely to develop dementia as whites. Hispanics, 1.5 times as likely. And women also more likely. So people go, well, yeah, women, I get that because women live longer. But that only accounts for a portion of it. Partly, there's a lot of research focus there, and we believe some of it will probably be hormonal as well, but there's a lot more to find out about. Why the racial or ethnic differences? Part of that has been undertreated or underdiagnosed conditions like diabetes, hypertension, things that cause vascular issues. Remember, when you have a good heart, where does the pump? It doesn't just pump to the part of your body, it pumps up too. So we're trying to get the word out because we want people to partner with their primary care doctor to control everything they can now. But there'll be a lot more to come on that. So the impact is huge. You can't see every little detail here. Pam will allow you to have access to these. But in general, it's a disease that takes a toll on the person, but also the people around them. And I suspect some of you are here today because of that. And the Alzheimer's Association has a whole lot of services that are focused on how do we support the caregiver. But caregivers for persons with dementia, as we know, over the course of care, half of them will develop depression at some point. We want to treat that. We want to help the caregiver. There is physical and emotional burden. Financial is huge. Most of the care, or 85%, is going to come from you and me. It's not going to come from home care or the nursing home. Most of the care is given by informal caregivers at quite a lot of expense to us individually. What I want to note, women are still more likely to care, But over the course of my career, especially the last 10 years, more and more men providing care. Y'all are awesome. I mean, some of my best caregivers and some of my best tips have come from the men who have taken on this role and do a fabulous job. Okay. One slide that we're not going to go over every little detail, but I think it's important to share in any presentation on dementia, are the warning signs. And so whether you're the Alzheimer's Association, the CDC, whether you're National Institute of Health, National Institute on Aging, everybody uses these same 10 signs. So if you have your little checklist, and there's checklists online, and you check off a couple, and then you get just, oh no, I think I have a problem. It's not to make us concerned or paranoid. It's to give us a blank to say, okay, I might be having a couple issues. Let me talk to my doctor. And so I also guide family members to use this, because you don't have to have all of these to have a concern. But if you do have one or two or three of them that are interfering with normal daily living activities, it's time to talk to your doctor. Does not mean that something else is not going on. And so the 10 warning signs, I think most often people, again, think memory. They do realize that sometimes there's planning and problem-solving issues, but sometimes we don't quite understand that the things we've done forever are really complicated. So brushing your teeth is an example. There are about 17 steps in that. Probably everybody in this room brushed their teeth this morning without even thinking about one step. So when you have a brain disease and the brain cells are changing and dying, interfering with a step, it can be noticed. And often it will be noticed in the higher level activities. Things like financial management have gotten very challenging with a lot of the technology. Things like driving, complicated medications. And so those are some of the things. I will say not everybody has all of these, but some people will begin to really lose things all the time. I lose things, but I can usually find them. There are people with dementia that become terribly suspicious and then will accuse you of having taken something. The changes in mood and personality is prominent with some individuals and not with others. So again, the list is a general to look at some things, not panic, but if you have one or two check marks, to go to your doctor and say, hey, we've noticed these things. Because your doctor's going to want to do numerous things before they diagnose. Okay, Chris. So why early detection? This is another thing that I really like to focus on, because early detection to me is respectful to the person. Sometimes families are like, oh, we can't tell them and we can't, and I'm like, but it's respectful. You're allowing the person to know. We tell somebody if they get cancer, we tell them if they get diabetes, that it is a disease just the same. They didn't get it because of something other than it just happened. And the respect by including them lets them tell us now what they want. It lets us ask them, hey, if at some point you need assistance, who would that be? What would that look like? And so I like that. I also like early detection because of the umbrella. When our doctors, I worked at Parkland for 33 years, when they would diagnose, that would allow us to work with that person and their family based on the specificity of the diagnosis. If it was Alzheimer's, we would sit down and help somebody, okay, it's time to do your legal planning, your financial planning, long-term care, but they had a little timeline. If it was something, really dramatic and somebody frontal temporal, we might make that a little bit more urgent. So the ability now of many of our physicians and providers to give a specificity also helps us really look at that. But for me, it's respectful. We do it in a really compassionate way with caring people. Okay, Chris. So a lot of people ask about treatments, and I think this has gotten really confusing over the last 3 years. There have been 6 to 8 medications on the market for about 23 years now. Those medicines, and a lot of people have heard about them, donepezil, Namenda, have always been there to treat symptoms. They never treated the underlying disease. So in July of 2021 and then last summer, we had 2 new IV-infused drugs approved by the FDA that begin to treat underlying disease. It's the first time we've had any. They're quite controversial for many reasons. IV, cost, efficacy, they're not going to help everybody. The thing where I also encourage a doctor who knows you is they understand the rest of your conditions. They're going to partner with you. If you were diagnosed with frontal temporal, most likely they wouldn't recommend any of these IV treatments because they've only been approved for very, very early Alzheimer's. So it's important to have somebody who knows you and has your best interest. I think the piece to know here is that we are learning more constantly. And I'm fortunate, I've been partnering with Alzheimer's for a very long time. So they do a lot of clinical and scientific updates every year, and I try to get on all of those so that I know what's the new thing. One of the things people are asking me about in presentations now is the blood test, because there's a blood test. The folks that I trust in terms of clinical expertise and the folks at Alzheimer's say that the blood test that will probably be reliable is about 18 months off. Now, when that happens, it will certainly be, you will be informed of that, whether you choose to use a blood test. That's an individual call. But there's a lot going on. And the other thing I want to stress here, when I began my career, it was a while ago, I think 1979, we were only talking about cure. Now we are enrolling 20-year-olds. We're talking about prevention. So the research piece has broadened immensely. We're looking at how do we also prevent and engage young people. So that's very different. Okay, Chris. So one of the things that we do presentations on is, what can I do today? Doesn't matter if I'm 25, doesn't matter if I'm 85, I'm 68. What does science tell us? And science says that there are some things I can do today to improve my brain functioning. And so, Chris, if you'll go to the next one. So, education. So I'm probably not going to go back to school at this point. But boy, I better be learning something new. There's something about new learning. I'm a crossword freak. We call ourselves the nerd family. We watch Jeopardy and do crosswords. But I need to do something different. That crossword is what I do all the time. New learning is part of what's so very important. The example that people use, or the clinicians use, is guitar, because you get multisensory learning. So if you're not already a player, it's one of the best. The getting moving, remember, aerobic exercise pumps the blood up as well as around. And so anytime you're engaged in your walking, it's pumping up. Good healthy eating, there's a million ideas on how to do that, but good regular diet. Maintaining good blood pressure, sugar levels, weight. Protecting your head. A lot of differences in the current literature on protecting your head in terms of long-term impact of concussions, but we just recommend you go on, protect your head. Why take a chance? Sleeping, hearing, not smoking, all of the things that we already know. You're going to hear more and more about the hearing. Have hearing amplified earlier than later, because the longer you let it go, the less engaged you are. So the things that we're missing here is social engagement. What happened at the beginning of the pandemic when you worked in elder care is we went full tilt to make connections with people. We visited people at their homes. We delivered things to them. We knew contact with one person a day, even one, is social engagement that is critical to our brain. So it isn't just one thing, it is diet, exercise, engagement, new learning, etc. Okay, Chris. So we're here today to make a difference. It might be make a difference in our home, in our church community, and on our street, wherever. So Chris, continue. I'm going to have you flip through several. Alzheimer's Association, we will talk more about them at the end. It is important to know they are 24 hours a day staffed with professionals, not volunteers. So you aren't going to get me. You're going to get somebody who's current. I always had my families put their 800 number on the refrigerator, and they're like, I'm never going to call them. And then every once in a while, I get a call from somebody saying, I hadn't slept in 2 days, and at 3 in the morning, I called them, and I think I'm going to survive. So you just never know when you might need a friend who understands and really can direct you to some assistance. Okay, keep going. I think we know about the Alzheimer's walks, et cetera, and then we'll talk about this at the end. Keep going. Chris, I'm going to have you go to the next slide where we start the, okay, keep going. And one more. So the program that Pam asked me to speak about today is effective communication strategies. But I wanted to give you some infrastructure first because it's really hard to understand how do I communicate with somebody if I don't understand that this is a disease, that they can't fix it, that me telling them, well, you can do this is not, I can't manage that. I can only manage me. So when we learn something about the changes over the course of the disease, then we can figure out what is it that you and I can do. As a caregiver, it's going to make my life easier and it's going to make the person I'm caring for much happier. So we're going to talk a little bit about those strategies. So basically, we'll talk a little bit about communication changes. Are you hearing okay? Okay. What's beyond that verbal? So we all know about body language, but what goes beyond the verbal? And then talk about some simple, some of them are very simple strategies we can use. Okay. So when we look at this slide, what I like about it is when you hear communication, you think about me talking to you right now, but you forget, it's me being able to express. It's you being able to comprehend. But you're also looking at me. You're seeing my body. You are looking at the tone, or you're hearing the tone of my voice. You're seeing the way I present. So at Parkland, I was director of geriatrics, and we were really busy and worked all over the county. And I'd be working with my staff, and then I'd go in with a client, and I would sit down, and you hear the stress goes away. And my staff would sometimes say, Jane, enough, go away, you're stressing me out. And I knew that, but when I got stressed and busy and my tone went up and I talked too fast, I had to learn. The best thing I could do was something I knew in kindergarten. Sit down and look at someone in the eye. Speak slowly. You hear the tone, my tone drops. So when you're thinking about communication, it goes way beyond just what I'm saying. It's also how I'm saying it, my tone, the stress or lack of it in my voice, etc. So remember that. Okay, keep going. So I'm not going to use this slide because we'll go into that with more detail, but a lot of clinicians will look at Alzheimer's in terms of early, kind of mid, and late. And communication typically alters dramatically during that period of time. If you're in a research area, you're working with UT or Dr. Kerwin on some of the research, they'll break it down into 9. But most clinicians and folks helping you will talk about 3 stages. Okay. So when someone is in an early stage, you know, often the only person who's really aware is the person who lives with them. Well, what if no one lives with that person? Well, then it might be the family came in for Christmas and stayed several days. That was very different than the phone calls they'd been having. So early, You may find someone who begins to have difficulty finding a word, not remembering something. Now, it's more likely that you're going to be forgetful of short-term things. So I don't remember what I had for dinner last night, but I can tell you exactly who I went to prom with when I was 16. That's more common. It can alter, but that's more common. One of the things is that it takes more time. So if I'm suddenly talking along right now and I lose my train of thought and it becomes uncomfortable, what is it that you and I do? We want to help that person, don't we? It's very difficult to allow them. Some say 3 seconds, some say 20, but to have that piece where it's just longer to develop the communication. Some people start to withdraw. Well, why would you withdraw? If you don't feel you can be a part of a conversation, if you feel people are asking you a question and you can't answer it, and then another question and you can't remember their name, sometimes you will withdraw. You can see, if you're close to the person, that can really result in difficulties with just that problem solving, that decision making. And so it really can interfere. So you'll have different things at different times, and we'll get more specific about that in a minute. Go ahead, Chris. So generally, if I'm somebody with just kind of mild and early dementia, you want to be able to sit with me and ask them, how would you like me to communicate with you? If we have the family over and you can't find the word, do you want me to offer or do you want me to wait? And so it's that communication, compassion, respect that one person who's very close or two can actually ask that person. Ask them while they are able to make those decisions. What do you think you would like? We begin to speak more slowly, shorter sentences, more specificity. Just kind of like you heard me when I was talking to my staff and I'm getting all, when I lower my tone and I go more slowly, some of that anxiety leaves. And then you leave plenty of time for conversation. Set up the conversation at the best time. When is the person doing well? Some people are morning people, some are not. Don't have those difficult conversations at the wrong time. Really think about how you include the person. So you do want to include them, but you want to include them early in the diagnosis so they can tell you, hey, this is what I want to do. I don't have a will, or I have a will, but I think I better update it because my eldest daughter passed on and I forgot to do so. Allows us to get all of those things together. I'm really big on you getting everything in one place, every little piece of information, all the insurance information, all the financial. You don't know when you're going to need it. Have it in one drawer, because when you have something that emerges that could be a crisis, it's there. You're not more stressed by trying to locate things. And it's amazing how many things our parents had that we weren't aware of. My father has been gone now 6 years, and we just found another CD. It was like, oh my goodness, how did this really kind of not very well-off farmer put away money? Well, that was kind of what they did. So, okay. So one of the things we don't want to do is make assumptions. People, they'll surprise us all the time, even people that we think we know well. And so we have a gentleman who does some speaking for the Alzheimer's Association. He was diagnosed at 62. He was a very successful broker here in Dallas. And his family, his wife was kind of like, I don't think things are quite right, but I can't put my finger on it. Well, they took their kids for a week vacation. And the kids not being with him every single day, but then spending 24 hours a day for a week, were like, Mom, something's wrong. So she spoke with her husband. He got diagnosed, and he said, okay, that's it. I've made enough money. I'm gonna live my life. She didn't make an assumption just because that was what he'd always done. She allowed him the respect of taking him, getting the diagnosis, and letting him make a decision for his future. So don't make don't make an assumption, ask the person. You'd be amazed. I have folks sometimes in caregiver support group who are like, oh, I was so afraid to talk to my mom, and I thought, oh, Mom, we really need to have this talk about getting a living will. And she's like, oh, I've had that for 15 years. I just didn't think you were ready to hear it. So we need to carefully and kindly have those conversations because people surprise us every time. We want to communicate in a way that's comfortable for the person. As I said, you don't go over at 7 in the morning if it's a night owl, but you also don't go at 8 at night when you've been working all day and running around if that person is just tired and done. So you set yourself up for success. Make it easy for you. Make it easy for the person. Select times and places to talk that are comfortable for that person. We don't need 17 family members there. We need a couple people who are really, really trusted, really kind, and will look at these parameters. Have some fun. We don't want to just be all gloom. So I'm real big on the laugh. Find a laugh every day. Plan it. Plan to be happy and have a laugh. And then, stay connected. Once you've made those forays, you can't just disappear. We used to call it, and there was actually a journal article about 25 years ago in JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association, called The Daughter from California. The family, everybody has decided, and the patient's good, and then the daughter flies in. Well, we don't want to be that person. We can't just come and then disappear. If we want to be a part of it, we figure out a way to sustain that. So, go ahead, Chris. I'm going to stop in a minute, and we're going to go into this in a little bit more depth, but I want to talk about the middle stage. So here, you probably will see somebody beginning to have a lot more verbal issues. Not that we can't speak. They're not aphasic typically. But it's my dad would say, well, get me that thing. Well, that thing was the pen. He knew a pen from the time he was old enough to speak. So you will see it sometimes with nouns, even before you see it with prepositions. Sometimes will just completely disappear. But you do see it a lot in terms of that naming. So you and I often will think, well, it's about remembering a person's name. Well, I'm not going to remember somebody I went to high school with always. But it usually is more specific. So trouble finding that name, repeating. Some will work and care for somebody who has Alzheimer's who will ask you the same question 20 times before 9 a.m. And you think you're going to just lose your mind. But it's not a new question to that person. If they're asking again, they're not retaining. And if you can accept that, it allows you that comfort of saying, oh, yes, Mom, Jim's coming over at noon today. Absolutely. And you can say it 10 times. You can say it 20 once you accept that that's how that person's disease is manifesting. Sometimes people invent new words, lose their train of thought, and sometimes can continue and sometimes can't. So maybe after you've given them ample time, you prompt something. Some people will just begin to speak less frequently because it's an effort, and or if they're initial, they may revert to their original language. There's this wonderful caregiver who speaks at support groups, and her mother's language was Greek. And she said as the disease progressed, her mom was no longer speaking English. Primarily, she spoke Greek. And she said, my husband didn't know a word of Greek. So when things were really bad and I was at the end of my rope, he'd take Mom for a drive. And she could just talk all she wanted in Greek. And it didn't bother him at all. And I got a break. So part of this is, I may retain primary language, I may not. I may suddenly start cussing a blue streak, and I have never been somebody who cussed a blue streak. So the reason that we point these out, it manifests differently. But you have to see what you're going to focus on for your loved one, because that's how you develop your process and your communication plan. It's how you build everything else. Now, the point at the bottom here, we make this over and over. Anything drastic is not dementia. It's always something else. Somebody gets up today and they are frantic and running and crying and picking. Call the doctor, get to the doctor. Typically, it's an underlying UTI, a stomach virus, a something, but maybe the person can no longer articulate that. Part of this along the way is you begin to understand that you need a baseline. And so I want to stop here for just a minute and talk about, again, communication in general. And Pam, what time is it, please? What time is it? 20 to 11. Perfect, okay. So communication, remember, I have to be able to express. Now, I might express, it isn't going to be all verbal, but you have to be able to understand what I'm trying to convey to you. So think about charades. It's hard. It's really difficult. So it's a two-way street. Communication is not one. Repetition, word finding difficulty, general forgetfulness, word production. Suddenly someone is not using, my husband's like a walking dictionary. If he suddenly was just using 4-letter words, I'd be like, ooh, we got trouble. So you know the person to be able to notice what the issues are with them. Reading and writing can be impacted. So I had this phenomenal 96-year-old gentleman who was taking care of his 90-year-old wife with Alzheimer's. And she wasn't terribly verbal, but he wanted to continue to engage her to do what she could. He was trying to allow her the respect of letting her do as much as she could. So he labeled all of the things in their house, towels, silverware, cups, glasses, and she was able to continue to do things. Some people will continue to read a great deal. Some will have an interruption of that reading and writing. My best friend made this huge calendar for her next door neighbor who has Alzheimer's, wrote everything down on it. And my friend calls me one night and she said, oh, Jane, I don't know what to do. I go over there and Linda's on November, but it's January. And yeah, I think that she's not comprehending that anymore. We pay attention so that we alter what we're doing. We don't know, it might not happen with the next person. So you do have to get specific. I think what we're trying to do with communication strategies is allow the person to continue to interact without getting frustrated. And if I sit here today and ask you 25 questions in Mandarin and expect an answer and then grade you on it, you probably won't be very comfortable. So we really want to think about, how do I use the information, because the way that my dementia manifests is going to be different than yours, but use it to develop a strategy that works for both of us. We want the person to be happy and we want to be less frustrated. So we have this thing about plan for success, and we're going to talk about that. Go ahead, Chris, if you would. So these are very simple strategies, but I think it makes a difference. So if I'm sitting like this right now and I'm is very different than if I am facing you, I'm getting down on your level, you can see me. It automatically, I slow down. So we want to have proximity to the person. We want to call them by the name they're comfortable with. You know, I don't know what I'm going to want, but I do know that I've had clients who were, particularly doctors, who still wanted to get up every day, put the white coat on, and be called Dr. Jane. And you know what? We had their families do that. We had, bankers, because I worked at the medical school too. that wallet was important. Well, we let them keep that wallet, keep a few bucks in that wallet. Look for things that show respect but allow that person to maintain something. So what is the name they want to use? Think about your tone. But the biggest one here that I really want to go into is kind of that avoid criticizing, arguing, correcting. It ain't gonna do nothing. And so if I'm here and I'm like, please don't do that. No, stop. Oh no, you can't do that, Mom. My tone, it changes my tone. I'm getting nervous. So we have family members actually post words that work. And it's things like, oh, let's go look at that together. May I help you? Words that start out feeling more open and connected and kind. And it's amazing, but if you post them, you get used to it. If you're somebody that, I have a son, my oldest son is the glass half empty. My younger son is the glass is always brimming over. Well, that's how they were born. So we've had to coach them a little bit, okay? My oldest one had to learn, you start out with something positive, you get a little better result in life. And the younger one, we had to say, everything isn't always roses. So the point is you and I can change us. We can't change the disease. We can change how we approach it. So you learn that criticizing, correcting, arguing is going nowhere. So what about you're taking care of Mom and she comes and she's frantic and she says, I've got to go down the street and pick up my mom. She's waiting for me. So what do you say? Okay, exactly your question. So this is where the support group people will call a fiblet. That it's okay to tell a little fiblet. Because what am I going to say? Mom, your mom died 72. No, we're not going to be cruel. We're going to say, Mom, let's go look there together. I think we have a picture of her over here. Oh, tell me a little more about her. So you begin to see, let's go look at, tell me about, oh, I remember a great story about your mom. Anything that allows me to connect, distract, and not say that, well, she's been dead for 32 years. There's no point. So we're big believers in fiblets. If you're not, this is going to be a difficult disease to navigate. So we'll get some more examples like that. Okay, so again, I really encourage people, start with taking some notes. You don't need to do it every single day. But over the course of several months, you're going to begin to see where is the person having difficulty. Maybe it's more with math, sequencing. They're not safe cooking anymore. They can't remember all the steps. Maybe it's communication. When do they do the best? Is it early in the day? Is it late in the day? One of my families are like, all the family always wants to be here. And we began to realize that Dad was doing really poorly at 4, 5, 6, 7 at night. He said it took us 6 months, and then we realized we just moved everything up to noon on the weekend. He has a ball. The grandkids come. He enjoys them. We had to begin to take notes to see what was going to work. You want a plan that works for you, that's effective for you, and comfortable for the other person. So I'm a big believer in taking some notes because I think you begin to pinpoint best time of the day and worst. So we ain't gonna plan the bath for the worst time of the day. We begin to see what can the person do. What can they still do? Can they garden? Can they dance? Can they sing? Can they, etc.? But also what brings them joy. Sometimes it's not the music of their youth. You'd be surprised. So I can hardly wait to see what I will, what kind of music I would like if I go that direction, because you just don't know. It's what you don't always expect. So because as you take the notes, you can also use those when you visit the doctor. because the doctor will be able to help you then say, oh, this is a really slow progression, or you know what, this isn't moving a little faster than we anticipated. Let's talk about next steps. Again, choosing your words, so post words. And the ones I really like are let's, may I, can I, giving somebody 2 choices, not 10. Don't say go dress, pull out the red and green pant and let them put them on if they're able to. Assist them as needed. Okay, so let's continue and we'll come back to this in a minute. In the middle stage, so being a social worker, you would think that I love kind of all of these touchy-feely terminologies, and I don't. Joining the person's reality, when I first saw this, I was like, oh my, I'm kind of a really practical, concrete person. But when you take care of somebody with dementia, you really get it. Because their reality has changed, and we're not going to change that, so join them where they are. If they now enjoy sitting out in the yard and taking short walks, if they enjoy a different kind of music, if they can fold clothes with you, if they can paint, maybe they never did those things. Join the person's reality. Assess what they need. You still have to be aware. Are they hungry? Are they in pain? Do they need to go to the bathroom? As the disease progresses through the middle stage, someone may be able to articulate less and less. So if they're always pulling, hey, may I help you get to the restroom? Because sometimes that's a sign. Or even more, you may need to look at skin and see if something has emerged. Somebody who doesn't remember that they ate. Has anybody dealt with that? I've had caregivers who are like, I just finished a full meal with Mom, and she's going, when are we eating? And I'm like, well, let's take that then. Let's not do 3 meals a day. That isn't gonna work, she's not gonna remember. Break it down into 6 or 8 small meals. Oh, sure, Mom, I'm getting something ready. We'll come together here in a minute. Alter your process will help that person based on what their needs are. Emotions are huge. So if I'm going to lose the higher level cognitive processes first, and maybe I don't understand all of your complicated words and sentences, what did I understand of what you said to me? How you said it. So the way that we convey something, the love, the support, the kindness, the lower levels of stress will make a huge difference. So emotion will last much longer. People, even in a fetal stage, and some people have lived long enough with Alzheimer's to be in a fetal stage, have some connection to emotion. They know if you're talking and giving them a hand massage that's kind. They know when you have a kind voice. So remember, emotion drives everything. Give briefer answers if you can, because we don't need to make it more complicated. Okay. Again, short sentences, speak slowly and clearly. When I get going too fast, that is a challenge for me. Limit distractions. We don't need a lot of other things going on. When visitors are over, you know, unless you have something extra planned, get the TV off. Some people thrive with their grandkids as their disease progresses. Some really can't take a lot of young children screaming and yelling. You have to look at the situation. And, you know, patience is our friend. One of the ladies says count to 3. I say 33 probably is more accurate. Okay, Chris. So you can begin with many people to use more visual cues and gestures. And just like the gentleman who put all of the words on his cupboards because he wanted his wife to feel she can contribute. And I said to him, you know, as the disease progresses, you might have to do a picture. Maybe she can't read spoon anymore, but she might recognize and connect the picture. It's trial and error. Provide the cues. Avoid a lot of drastic and sudden and loud noises. Sometimes you can write something down. My friend who did the calendar, it worked for a long time, and then one day it just didn't, but you can try it. You want to ask person yes or no questions if you can. Things that are not really, you need a long, detailed answer. Always, as I said, avoid quizzing and go with the positive versus the negative. Okay, Chris. Joining the reality, essentially, we've already covered that. Focus on feelings. Fiblets are okay if, in fact, it's helping that person. It will help you because it is allowing that person to be more comfortable and not in stress. Okay? So there are a lot of slides for the late stages, but I spend less time on it because it's a multi-sensory input that we're looking for. If someone progresses to the late stage of Alzheimer's, if you've seen this, most people by this point are really pretty nonverbal. They're typically not very mobile. They may make some guttural sounds, but there isn't a lot. So we want to help that person be comfortable, but we want to give you, the caregiver, a way to continue to interact. So a lot of what we do here is really to allow people to continue to stimulate the person. So there may be very few words by this point. We want to be particularly aware of body language because we now are the ones who have to read whether the person is sick, whether the person is in pain. Our goal is to just help them be happy by communicating. And so, Chris, we'll go through the next set of slides kind of quickly because it gives us an opportunity with each sense. So sensory is how we can reach people. And really, this pertains to also advanced stages of other diseases. My mother died a very, very painful death of cancer. And the pain was so significant, and at that point in time, pain medicine was not as effective, that she really, this English and Latin teacher couldn't cognitively function, but it wasn't dementia. But we could use touch. My mom was always a toucher. So we could sit with her, hold her hand, do hand massages, do foot massages. We could allow her to hold a stuffed animal, take in a family pet. We could do those things with her. Now, what if you have somebody who was never a touchy-feely? Try it. It might change by now. But respect. If they don't respond well, then move on to something else. But I always like to start with touch because it gets the person's attention. They are directed to us. Okay. Some people retain vision, and so folks will come in with things that are colorful. They'll show family pictures. Well, family pictures in my book are more assistable in the early and mid stages, but it works with some people. And maybe it doesn't matter what the picture is. Maybe it's a beautiful picture of nature. Sitting outside, seeing the day, visiting a place if they are able to. What are your opportunities to engage that person in terms of their vision? Okay, Chris. Sound, like I said, music. Very, very few people in this world are not engaged through one kind of music or another, and we've got a million of them. And so you can think about how you use music to enhance you as the caregiver. Music makes me happy, not everybody, but also to engage the other individual. Or sounds that they were used to. So sounds of nature were huge where we grew up. There were no other things. We didn't have anything else, but we heard the cows mooing, the crows cawing. So what is it where you can connect? I read a lot to persons who are ill, regardless of their disease. My mother-in-law is 93 right now, sharper than I am, by the way, but she's bedfast, incontinent, and so I'll go over and read and read and read, and I'll read 2 or 3 chapters of a book at a time to her, and then the next day, the next. Playing an instrument, reading anything that, again, gives us a platform. Sometimes it's as much about me. I need a way to connect now. I don't know what to do. My husband will say, well, yeah, I stopped by Mom's, but we didn't have anything to talk about. Well, really? There's a world out here. You always have something to talk about. Plan it as needed. Okay, Chris. I'm not as big on the smell at this stage as some people, so just know that's my bias. But the Alzheimer's Association does want me to mention that there is a lot out there about using some of the scents, and particularly some of them oils, aromatherapy, etc. I am a big believer in the household scents of somebody's youth. Make those rolls, put together the boiled chicken, whatever. But I'm cautious, and the reason I'm cautious with the aromatherapy is some people do develop allergies. So again, you try something, these are trial and error, and see where it goes. Okay, taste changes for everybody. Like I said, you may do 3 meals a day, you might do 2, you might do 7. Things that the person can easily eat, especially if you're still able to feed yourself. I don't care if you use a spoon or your hand, but it is pretty hard to eat soup with a hand. So think about things where the person can still be involved as much as possible. A lot of people with later stage Alzheimer's crave sweets. And so popsicles are great, ice cream, and most of the physicians will go, let them have something that they will intake and makes them happy because there's fluids in all of it. Okay, next one. Okay, I want to stop there because I want to backtrack just a minute before I lose everybody with talking too long. I want to mention some things that we are really fortunate to have in our city that a lot of folks don't know about. I think we all know that the Alzheimer's Association has phenomenal support groups for caregivers. Senior Source, if you're not familiar with the Senior Source, fabulous support groups for caregivers. They have them now for young caregivers, for male caregivers, for, it really doesn't matter. Angry daughters, or, we got something for everybody. But we also are initiating the support group for persons with dementia. So if I was diagnosed tomorrow, I don't want to just talk to my family. I want to talk to somebody who doesn't know me. I want to talk to somebody who's had the same diagnosis and the same fear. So that will be an opportunity. Services abound in our community, but they fall really within the parameters of our state. So be aware. You can call Alzheimer's. You'll get somebody in Chicago, but they know the local resources, and they will direct you to what's available here. You can call Senior Source, where they have a caregiver support program, and they will do the same. You can call Area Agency on Aging, because there's one that covers every single county in the nation. I called them in Illinois when I was arranging transportation for my father when I had to take his car keys away. Yeah, that was a pretty day. So there are people here to help. In general, a lot of folks know that. They tend not to call until it's a little too late. I'll get a call. I have to have surgery tomorrow. I need you to send somebody to take care of Mom. Even if you got $1 million, I'm not going to find you somebody by tomorrow morning. So you really have things ready at your tips. Find out about services way early instead of way late. But the other things I want to share are the things that I think we never spent enough time on when I was new in the profession. These are things that enhance our life and make us happy. So does anybody know about the Meadows or the DMAs or the Arboretums programs? They've got these wonderful programs. You can sign up. It's a small group. Usually there's 8. I get to go. I get to take my husband who has dementia, and we get an experience by people who are trained to understand the disease and trying to make this best for me. Think about going to the Arboretum, what a wonderful treat that is. But if I didn't feel comfortable taking someone, these are small groups. They are trained to do that. And so we have we're really fortunate in Dallas to have those. Meadows, DMA, Arboretum, Presbyterian. There are memory cafes. Have you ever heard of Memory Cafe? Okay. Support groups are fabulous, but what's that about? It's really trying to help us get through the day. Memory cafes are somewhere to go to have fun. I mean, do we still want to have fun? We want to engage our loved one in fun. We want them to find some joy. And so memory cafes simply exist at typically no cost for 2 hours every 2 weeks or once a month in different locations for us just to go have fun. We might dance one week, we might sing the next, we might paint, but where you can go and feel comfortable. Now, I want to mention volunteer opportunities. When you are early in the process, you don't want somebody just to sit you in your house. You want to still be engaged and productive. And so another hat I wear in the volunteer world, we are doing helping people develop volunteer opportunities for persons with early dementia. So the first was we trained the master gardeners over in Old East Dallas. And they go, and now there's a group of people who feel they can work side by side with them. So we train them first so that it's a comfortable situation. I had a caregiver who changed churches, not because she wasn't happy with her church, but she wanted to be able to take her husband with her to do volunteer work. And their church, all of the opportunities were really large. So they chose to go to a church where 6 or 8 people got together to do volunteer efforts instead of 50. You can create that in any size of church, but we never really thought about it. You want to be productive, you want to do something. You don't want someone just to do for you. And so I think those are really exciting opportunities that we have in a large metropolis that we would not necessarily have other places. So that's particularly, I think, something that is good for you to know in terms of early stage. In terms of the middle stage, as someone progresses, I think it's time for you at least to have a respite plan. You know, everybody should have an opportunity to do something on their own a few minutes a week. And so, anybody heard of the 36-hour day? Okay. 36-hour day, and I don't remember when it was published anymore, by Rabin and Mace, a doctor and a social worker, way back, 70s maybe. But it was called the 36-hour day because you felt like it if you were taking care of somebody with Alzheimer's. And when I first read it, you know, I'm working full time, I'm raising a family, every day felt like it was 6 hours long. And the thought of 36, where you're doing the same thing and you don't have an outlet, respite care, everybody needs a break. Call your brother and don't just say, I need some help. I need you to come Saturday morning and you have to get very specific. There are respite funds in the city through Area Agency on Aging. They are not income-based, but they are not open-ended, meaning this year you might qualify for 30 hours in a year, you might qualify for 40, but it's something. A lot of our churches, another one of my volunteer hats, we have a faith-based initiative, and we're training churches to start respite programs. So Highland Park Methodist and Preston Hollow Baptist are the kind of the lynch places, and they are now training a lot of other churches because you can run, it's like a Mother's Day Out, only they have different names for it. So you can run the program for very, very little money, but you do need to have training so that people can volunteer in a safe and productive way. So middle stages, think about respite. Look at your social options. Is the person doing better now in the home or out? If going out to eat is really important to you and the person's no longer comfortable, then, you know, that's where you get your respite. Have someone come so you can go out with your friend. But don't drag them just because you want to go out. There are restaurants that specialize who have trained their staff. If you ever go in and you see a purple tablecloth, you know they've done some Alzheimer's training. We're working right now with one of the big theater complexes. I'm not going to say which one because they haven't said yes, but we're asking them to run a Saturday matinee at 10 or 11 in the morning with the lights on, and where somebody can bring their loved one, and it doesn't matter if they talk, scream, or walk around. Lights are on, but it allows that caregiver to get out. So there are things that we are really focusing on. One of the other things in the middle stage that I learned from my wonderful caregivers, and they taught me everything, is that you have a favorite television program that you and your husband or wife had watched forever. There may be a time where it's no longer NCIS or SUV because the person can't distinguish. And they're sitting there now, a program they enjoyed, and they're crying and they're afraid. And then they worry about it afterwards. You have to watch what's going on and adapt. You and I have to adapt. You tape that program now, but you aren't going to play it if I can no longer separate what's fiction and reality. You think about those programs are kind of brutal. They're fun, engaging, but so pay attention to that as well. If somebody can do anything. My mother-in-law really could never accept her mother's dementia. And she's like, I can't let her fold that. She doesn't do it right. Who cares? Like, there's how many ways can we fold a towel? You can refold them. I mean, there are things, allow the person the respect of engagement and to do something, please. By late stage, most all of us will have had to enlist assistance. We literally cannot do this alone. Family, friends, long-term care insurance, respite care, adult daycare, something. Use those opportunities that we learned about. There's a great caregiver who said, Mom, at this point we had to place her, but I'd go to the nursing home and I would brush her hair for like an hour. And my husband would say, oh, you should see her face when you do that. She relaxes, she smiles. It may not be the communication we're used to, but it's the communication that worked. The last thing I want to say before we kind of ask for questions is just the value of the support group from the little things that the caregivers taught me. I think they're much better caregivers than I ever was. So when adult undergarments came out and people were like, oh, the dad doesn't want to wear it, and this caregiver said, oh, I just give them to him and say, here's your new underwear. Oh, well, that was brilliant. I would never have thought of that. Here I was fighting with this adult diaper or whatever you want to call it. Another gentleman, his wife was really, really bad sundowning. Everybody knows sundowning late in the afternoon, so some people just really, that is their worst time of the day. As the sun begins to set, it seems to affect the brain, and even if you increase lighting, it's challenging. So they'd go along all day and things would be fine, and then suddenly she'd look at him and go, who are you? Where's Jack? I need to... And he learned over time. This is such a smart caregiver. He'd go upstairs, he'd put on a different shirt, and he'd come back down and he'd say, honey, Jack, let's go for a walk. And it worked for a while. So the things that you garner from each other are much greater than what you get from me in terms of the things that work. What works for me is not going to be the same for you, but it allows me to think differently. Remember, you want to build a plan for success. You want to make life easy. Set the person up for success. If you would, go to the last slide. Just remember the programs. There are a lot of programs. There are a lot of education programs. I told Pam one of the ones that I think is really, well, there's a lot of helpful, but the one on legal and financial, because that's such a touchy topic. There are a lot of programs that you might benefit from. The Alzheimer's Association does a Zoom every Saturday at 10. We rotate presenters and topics, and so there are lots of other topics that you can always Zoom into if you don't want to get out in the cold. So I'm going to stop there because I've talked a long time. I would like your suggestions, your comments, your questions, please.
I'll get the other part.
Beg pardon? What is that TTY? TTY is for deaf individuals. They have a special phone that connects, and as long as they are able to see and read, the text comes across, and then I can text back in. So healthcare providers, every big healthcare provider, all have TTY phones. Okay.
So, I hate microphones. I feel very awkward. My mom is in middle stages. She's in assisted living, has been since October. And her biggest thing is, come pick me up and bring me home. It's time for me to go home. And I struggle with, I've gone through the process of, you lived by yourself, you thought people were in your house, you got scared, you lived with us for a while, we decided it was best for you, and when I get through all that, she'll go, okay, 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 that makes sense. But it keeps happening, and so I don't know whether to tell her you're home, I don't know what to tell her.
First of all, God bless you. It's the most painful thing when your parent is upset with you. When my dad called me, I flew back from Chicago after I took the car keys, and he called me at 6 o'clock the next morning. He's a farmer. I need to go to the store. It's painful. So give yourself a break too. This, I need to go pick up my mom, I need to go home, is really, really difficult to deal with. First of all, you're using logic because you're saying, you were alone and this was not working, and you're doing that kindly. And for a little bit, you might be able to say that 25 times a month and it might be effective, but at some point it will not be. So what else can we do? Can we say, the doctor has prescribed this for your condition, and it is fabulous because it's around the corner from the house and I can come every 2 days. Oh, I'm so happy to come here. We try different things. What does the facility suggest? Because they deal with this all the time. Is there a safety plan? Because yes, in fact, there are people who leave locked facilities. What is the plan? We didn't talk about that, but by the time you're at mid-stage, everybody ought to sign up for Safe Return. That's the program. It partners with Medic Alert, where you've got a current picture of the person if they would leave somewhere or your home. Because 60%, they estimate, of persons with Alzheimer's will wander at some point. But we don't know who are the other 40%. We don't know when. So rather than have that worry. So what I think you can only do is continue to relax yourself, hug her and say, Mom, this is what the doctor advises right now, and we are so lucky to have you here in a safe place where we can spend time with you. Sometimes people are like, well, I take her out every day for a drive, and I do Saturday and Sunday lunch at the house. For some people, that becomes worse. Again, you have to pay attention. If you take her out for Christmas, is it worse? If you get my drift. So what are we doing for us versus what are we doing for them? Anybody have a better thought for her? Because this one really, honestly, it's one of the most painful. Any other comments or tidbits, fiblets, or questions? Anything I said that didn't make sense?
I was just going to comment that there may be one benefit that you can think of how you've responded to your mom, and because of the short-term memory, probably shortly thereafter, she's not going to be holding it against you, and if she's in a facility, they respond to her and get her involved in something that you're probably hurting more about it at the moment than she is.
And I think I have such a hard time, not telling her the truth. It's my mom. Sorry, y'all. Right in the middle of this.
I have a friend
We get it.
who is the wife of a Baptist minister who's been able to take care of her mother-in-law, his mother. She referred to when she said something that she knew was not true. She says, I just tell myself that that's a therapeutic fib.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Therapeutic fit.
yeah.
And my husband says it all the time. He's like, you got to remember, she's not going to know in 2 seconds that you told her. She's not going to remember that, it's fine. She's going to forget that you told her whatever. So it's not that big a deal. I think it's just that, part of me that's like, I have to tell my mom the truth. So.
That's why we coined the term fiblet, because
Yeah,
it didn't sound
yeah.
as bad as an outright lie.
Exactly,
I mean,
exactly.
it cushioned it a little bit.
And that's the hard part
E-
to talk about with her parents, is like, she said the other day, I said, no, your parents are, because she says they're gonna come pick me up. She thinks they're gonna pick her up to come
Yeah,
down.
that's very common.
And so she said, I said, no, they've been gone for about 30 years. And she said, did I play for their funeral? Because she grew up playing the organ. And she always played at everyone's weddings and funerals. And so she was like, did I play for their funeral? And I almost wanted to say yes, just to make her feel like, oh, wow. But I was like, no, you were there. You know, you did a great job.
And really, you could say any of those things. It's more about how you're saying it and relaxing when you say it, and all of those things. One of the reasons we really encourage sticking with a primary care provider, if you find a good one, is that we used to play the role of being the bad guy. So sometimes somebody just has to be the bad guy. You're going to have to go to rehab. You're going to have to leave your home. And we, as the doctor, social worker, clinician, would rather have played that role than the family. We want the family to be set up for success. In the case of some families, so for instance, why was I the one who took my dad's car keys when I live 18 hours away? Because my brother simply could not do it emotionally. And he lived closer. He was going to see Dad more. It had to be me because I could take it. There are ways that we have to look at our situation. Your husband clearly understands things. How do you take suggestions from that? Give yourself a little bit of a pass. You're doing the best you can. You have a safe place for Mom.
Yeah.
You're happy with the care? Well, that's checking 5 boxes, not 2.
They like her too.
They
Like
like
they
her.
love her, and when we get to the end of the conversation of, you're here, and I'll go, oh, and the people here are so nice, and she'll go, oh my gosh, they are so nice. So, yeah, it ends up okay. It's just getting to that point. Thank you.
And talk to this close. In my situation, I'm dealing with a sister who is in denial that anything is wrong. She is in Austin, and our mother had Alzheimer's and dementia. She's passed now. But I tried a couple of years ago. This all started with my sister. And at that point, she was listening to me. I said, Susan, you're starting to repeat yourself. Or you realize you asked me the same questions over and over again. And she kind of acknowledged it. And I said, why don't you talk to your doctor? And she promised after the holiday, I'll make an appointment. Well, she never did. And now she's at the point where if you bring anything up to her, she gets defensive. It's my health, it's my business. And my brother-in-law is legally blind, diabetic, and totally dependent on her. So he won't question her and say, do you realize you're doing these things? Because she gets defensive with him. And most of the time, she stays angry. So, and her kids, she's got 2 children.
Oh, she has children, okay.
And they have tried to speak with her about it, and she just gets defensive. So everybody just kind of tiptoes around her, doesn't want to say, do you realize you have a problem? Even all their friends, she's got a problem. So I see her declining, and my fear is that
you're going to have a
something bad is gonna
crisis
happen.
if something doesn't happen. I'm sad to say, but I've seen this scenario many times, many. So a couple things, and I don't want to belabor if people need to leave, but about this situation. First of all, often family are not aware because the live-in person, sister, spouse, it doesn't really matter, has been filling in the gaps. Well, in this case, she is doing everything because she has a dependent spouse. So doing everything means also that whole financial piece. One of the reasons I'm big on this early detection, we're all getting scammed. They told us 20% of us got scammed by something financial in 2023. I mean, we need to be protecting people early. So I think you are upfront with her children. They can either take some drastic action where they go and kindly sit with her and say, we want to go to the doctor with you because we want to see what we can do to best take care of you so you can take care of Dad. I mean, there are ways that we word things. The doctor can't tell you anything without her permission, but you can send them all the information you want. So I have families where someone has refused, where they'll send in, there's a checklist on the Alzheimer's website where you can detail some of the things you're noticing. You know, was your sister always a reluctant person? Was she ever engaged in healthcare? Do you think this is just her last way to protect the little piece they've created?
I mean, my sister has a master's in education. I
Okay,
mean, she's a
so
smart
simply,
person.
I would want to push this issue because you have a dependent spouse and you have an accident waiting to happen on scams. I've seen people literally open the door to a stranger and let them in who's never in their life would have done that. You don't know when something's going to happen. I think that you really need to have a serious conversation with the kids.
Yeah,
Serious.
I've been trying to push them, but
And tell them all of the things that could happen. If she gets sick tomorrow, who's going to go quickly to take care of Dad? If she gets scammed out of money, what will be there for their mortgage? Give some of the worst case scenario, only because that might. Somebody had a suggestion over here? Yeah. This is my new social work friend over here. No, she really is. So I just met her today. So we wax and wane on those services. Presently, if you call today, Senior Source through their caregiver support program would have somebody that might be able to go do a home visit. Parkland Geriatrics has a grant from the state. They absolutely would be able to go and do a home visit. But we're talking about Austin here, right? Yeah. So I can't absolutely guarantee you without you calling Area Agency on Aging into Austin and pushing the issue. Hey, who would do this there? You know, we have a whole mobile mental health team here, and we have for a long time. People didn't realize this, but we have crisis teams. We're trying to avert a crisis. But you will get, I would say in my personal 1 out of 25 people will never, ever agree to go to the doctor. You have to have something at home. Please.
I'm a strong believer in fading the heat. And my mother was doing very poorly, and so was my grandfather. And so I decided that the doctor was going to be the bad guy. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry, Grandpa. You know, they're saying that we have to do this. And I would fade the heat. And the doctor that my mother had was not very good. And I finally took him out in the hall and said, you need to cowboy up because you haven't done a very good job of making sure that my mother is in a safe place. You're the guy that can order at least a rehab facility or something so that, because every time, my brother lived on a farm, and every time I was down there to be with her, I'd end up taking her to the emergency room. They couldn't get up the stairs. They couldn't get a gurney down the hall. She couldn't make it to the bathroom. And my brother, in tears one day, said, she's going to die in my house, and I won't be able to deal with that. And I said, no, she's not going to die in your house because I'm going to get hold of the doctor, and he has fallen down on the job in a number of places, and I've already told him. And I finally took him to the hall and said, cowboy up. You're sending her to a rehab facility. She's been in the hospital long enough. We can go and work with the nursing home. And I said, furthermore, her treatment is getting worse than her illness. So you be the bad guy. And so I was able to push it off on him. And every time she didn't like where she was, I'd have to say, you know, Mom, maybe you need to talk to your doctor. Fade the heat.
You need 5 ideas for one to work. Just have to.
If you have access to a friend, about 25 of us, including the minister, signed a letter. We sent it to all 4 of his children, one of which was definitely in denial about everything, and also to the doctor. And I heard from this man this morning. He's at the Edgemere, and he's doing well. But he was dangerous. He drove. He didn't have a license. Somebody took advantage of him monetarily. He was trying to buy a car for a lady that told it, the car dealership, she was his grandchild. But they were suspicious. It was just wild. But all we could do is write this letter and send it to his children and the doctor. And I was grateful for the church and the help.
And what a wonderful example, because we have a lot of folks who have outlived their children, their significant others. And it is the faith family, it is the neighborhood who intervenes. I used to get calls sometimes from folks where there wasn't anybody, and we would ultimately end up calling Adult Protective Services because there at that point was neglect or abuse or exploitation. But they will allow the person to remain in home unless it's really, really, really critical. You're trying to avert that crisis. You're trying to push some issue with the kids now before we have that. Other things? Please.
I help a younger friend with her mother that has probably initial stages of Alzheimer's with respite care. And I guess my question is, do you have help with time concept? There'll be times she'll be gone 12, 14, 16 hours a day, and she will ask me, you know, can you come stay 6, 8 hours with Mom? You don't have to stay the whole time, but if you could come for this length of time, that would be great. So every time I have gone, it's like, you know, again, she didn't have any time concept, even though her daughter has a beautiful